This Parsha podcast is dedicated in the merit of a speedy recovery, of a total recovery for Yosef, Shraga, Halevi, ben Esther. May he have a Refuah Sheleima. It's the second week of the 2026 Torch fundraiser, the annual campaign. It's in its second week. We're nearing the finish line. I can almost sense the end. We're making a lot of progress thanks to you, our friends, our supporters, our listeners, the Parsha podcast faithful, who click givetorch.org, who find the link in the description. Every donation is doubled. And I was feeling a little bit guilty. You know, this podcast is called the Parsha podcast. It's not called the Annual Torch Fundraiser 2026, givetorch.org. Every donation is matched. Every donation is doubled. Podcast. It's called the Parsha podcast. And the idea is we're supposed to talk about the Parsha. But now, this is the 6th Parsha podcast episode that I start the episode with something else. And I drone about the fundraiser and how we need everyone to go to givetorch.org. You can find the link in the description. Every donation is doubled. And I spent a few minutes talking about it, trying to encourage you and your friends to go to givetorch.org and to make a donation. Maybe it's wrong for me to dedicate part of the Parsha podcast towards the fundraiser. So I was trying to justify it to myself. And the first idea that I thought of is that, well, the only way we can have the Parsha podcast from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas, it's only if we have a successful campaign. So therefore, the fundraiser is sort of part of the Parsha podcast. It's an integral, indispensable, inseparable part of the Parsha podcast. So the fundraiser is the Parsha podcast. That's one idea that I had. And then the second idea that I had is that, well, let's say there's around 50 weeks in the year, 50 Parsha podcast weeks, and 2 of them, 4%, 2 of them are dedicated, or at least the first couple of minutes are dedicated towards encouraging you to pause the podcast and click the link in the description, givetorch.org. Every donation is doubled. Every donation is matched. It's okay. It's a little asterisk in the Parsha podcast. It's called the Parsha podcast with a small little dab, a tiny little dash, once a year, 4% of fundraising. That's okay. And it's been an incredible year so far. It's been an incredible campaign so far. We are outpacing last year's campaign. And I have to tell you, even though as of this recording, on Wednesday evening, there are 677 different donors who have gone to givetorch.org and made a donation. Every single donor brings me, Yaakov Walby, proud host of the Parsha podcast, brings me joy. Not only because every donation brings us closer to our goal, and if we hit our goal, please God, with the help of the Almighty and your generosity, givetorch.org, every donation is doubled. That will ensure that we can continue doing what we do at the Torch Center, the Parsha podcast. It's not just that. Every donor, every donation brings me joy because it reinforces the idea that there are people who value the Parsha podcast to such an extent that they want to invest in it. I work pretty hard to get a Parsha podcast each week. Some are better than others. That's okay. It's just the natural distribution of podcasts. Some will be exceptional and some will be passable, serviceable. Good, it's okay. Your mom likes it. Some are like that. But there are people who are saying this enterprise, this emporium of Torah, the Parsha podcast, and all the other great work coming out of the Torch Center in Houston, Texas, it's something that I want to invest in. I want to go to givetorch.org. I want to make a donation. I want to see my donation double. I want a part of this enterprise. And I have to say, there's something extra special about a first-time donor. When someone's already given in the past, I feel like they're already part of our ecosystem. They're already an investor. And to re-up them, it's easy. It's easy for us. It's easy for them. Because to give that first donation, that first time you go to givetorch.org, you make a donation, every donation is doubled. It's hard. It's challenging. And it reminded me of the first time that the Tabernacle was erected. And we have spoken about this in the Parsha podcast. No one was able to lift the beams. Even Moshe couldn't lift the beams. They were too heavy. God had to help Moshe. And the commentaries explain that the first time you do a mitzvah, the Satan doesn't want this mitzvah to happen. And he fights to the death to prevent you from doing it. And you need an extra special dose, oomph of energy and a little help, a little nudge from God to be able to do it. But once the tabernacle is erected once, it becomes much easier to do the second time. So I'm not trying to steer you off here. I'm not trying to say, well, if I give one donation, then I'll have to give more. No, we're only asking for one donation in 2026. GiveTorch.org. But I know how hard it is if you've never done it before. You've never gone to GiveTorch.org. You've never clicked that link in the description. It's hard to do. That's why I always say, take a small step. Just click the link with the express intent of not donating. That's like halfway there. Once you're there, who knows what could happen? Who knows what's going to be once you're there? You may feel an impulse, a nudge to make a donation. Every donation is doubled. GiveTorch.org. Help us reach our goal. We adore. We cherish every donor, every friend, every investor. Every donation brings us happiness. We rejoice and celebrate with each contribution. GiveTorch.org. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. It's Parsha Tzav. And like the previous Parsha, the subject of our Parsha is almost exclusively sacrifices. And it begins with the priestly protocol of how sacrifices are processed. Last week, we learned about the various different sacrifices a person can bring. And now we read about, well, when a person brings it, what do the priests do with it? How do they process it? What's the protocol? And it begins with the protocol of the Ola, of the elevation offering. Last week, we began with the concept of sacrifice with the Ola one. And this week, we begin with the protocol of the processing of the Ola, specifically the tamid Ola that's offered in the afternoon. In late afternoon, towards the evening, that sacrifice is the end cap of the entire day's sacrifices. It's the last thing that's placed upon the altar, and we're told about what has to happen. The sacrifice is placed upon the altar. On the altar, there are various fires, and the sacrifice, the animal, is burned. And in the morning, you're left with ashes, a pile of ash. And the first law of our Parsha is the mitzvah to clear away the ash. Before we begin the next day's services, before we even bring the first sacrifice, the tamid sacrifice of the morning, there is a mitzvah, there is a commandment to clear away the ashes from yesterday's sacrifices. The priest would ascend the altar holding a shovel, and he would maneuver, he would jostle the coals a little bit, get a scoopful of ash, and walk down the altar and deposit the ashes near the altar. There was a special place on the eastern side of the altar where they would deposit the ashes. Talmud tells us this is one of the miracles that happened in the temple and the tabernacle, that these ashes would be absorbed into the ground. Now, every day, the Kohen would only remove one shovelful, one scoop of ashes. What about the rest of the ashes? They would be arranged on top of the altar. And periodically, when there was so much ashes, it was hard to maneuver around the top of the altar, then there would be a second process where the ashes would be removed, not to that spot on the eastern side of the altar, but they would be removed out of the city to a pure place. That was not done every day. That's the beginning of our Parsha, the removal of the ashes in the morning. Next, we read about the fires. There must be fires atop the altar. They can never be extinguished. We always think of the fires as being a means to process sacrifices. But the truth is, there must be a steady fire maintained atop the altar, whether or not there are any sacrifices to process. The priest would arrange logs each morning to maintain a steady fire. Now, Rashi observes that if you read the first 6 verses of our Parsha, it says the term fire or pyre atop the altar 4 times, and he cites the Talmud, which says that at various times, there were 4 different fires atop the altar. Rashi tells us something very interesting. Even though the temple and the tabernacle, certainly, there was a divine fire that descended from heaven. In the first temple, there was a fire in the shape of a lion that was crouching at all times, like a wound-up lion, ready to pounce. That was the shape of the divine fire atop the altar. In the second temple, it wasn't quite as powerful. It was shaped like a dog. So you didn't need to have any human-produced fire in order to burn the sacrifices. Nevertheless, it's a mitzvah to supplement the heavenly fire with a human-made fire. You have a heavenly fire, but nevertheless, you must arrange the logs atop of the altar to perpetuate the fire as if there was no miracle. This is the protocol of the Olah that opens our Parsha. Next, we read about the protocol of the mincha, of the meal offering. These, again, are offerings not made from animals, but from flour and oil and frankincense. As we saw last week, it could come in a variety of different ways, either raw, so you have just the flour and the oil and the frankincense, or it could be baked or fried in a variety of pans. And this is processed atop the altar. The priest takes 3 fingerfuls of the meal offering and burns it atop the altar, and the leftovers, and this is true for most meal offerings. There's some meal offerings that are burned completely, namely the ones brought by the Kohanim, by the priests, but the leftovers of ordinary meal offerings are eaten by Aaron and his sons in the courtyard of the Tabernacle and the Temple. There were 3 different types of offerings brought by Kohanim. There was the initiation offering, the first day of a Kohen's service at the temple or the tabernacle. He would bring a special offering that was burned in its entirety. There's the daily high priest offering. And then there's the first day of a high priest's tenure as high priest. He brought a special offering. Those are all burned atop the altar in its entirety. But even a priestly meal offering that's burned in its entirety, it still has to have the 3-finger process of burning that amount atop the altar, separate from the rest of the meal offering. Now, when the Kohanim do eat it, it must be in his matzah, the verse tells us. It cannot be rendered into chametz, and even the leftovers that are not burned on the altar, are eaten by the priests, cannot be made into chametz. We read how, very interesting, what happens if a meal offering that's going to be eaten by the Kohen, it touches a different food or a different item, like a vessel. It touches it in a way that some of the taste or flavor or consistency can be absorbed. Suppose someone brings a meal offering and they do the process of offering the 3 fingerfuls on top of the altar, and the rest is going to be eaten by the Kohen, right? So the Kohen has lunch. It's a meal offering. But he also brought a sandwich from his house, or a donut. And the two touched each other. Well, now the donut, it absorbs the stringencies of the meal offering that it rubbed against. Who could eat it? When can they eat it? Where can they eat it? All of these stringencies that were true to the meal offering get conferred onto whatever it touched, again, in a way that it can absorb. The donut may have been permitted to anyone to eat, provided that their dietitian approves. Whole30 approved. But now, because it absorbs some of the flavor, some of the texture, some of the particles of the meal offering, all these stringencies of the meal offering are conferred upon this item. It now is elevated. As you mentioned, the Torah then tells us about the various meal offerings of priests, and thus concludes the protocols of the mincha. So we had the protocols of the ola, and then the mincha, the elevation offering, and then the meal offering, and then comes the protocol of the sin offering. It's slaughtered to the north of the altar. The food that can be consumed, or the part of it that can be consumed by the priest, it's eligible to be eaten by any priest who was eligible for service at the time of the service. This is complicated. The whole subject is complicated and foreign to us. But any Kohen who could have done the service at the time the service was done could eat from the meat of the sacrifice after it was processed. Meaning, if there was a priest who was impure at the time of the slaughtering of the sin offering, and now part of the meat is now eligible for Kohanim to eat because the priest was impure at the time of the slaughtering of the sacrifice, even though subsequently he became pure, he is still ineligible to eat from that particular sacrifice. Protocol of the sin offering, protocol of the guilt offering, and finally, the protocols of the peace offering, of the shlamim. Many different types of peace offerings. There's the peace offering brought by the public. And there are 3 different peace offerings brought by individuals. You have the Chagiga and Simcha peace offerings brought during the pilgrimage season to the temple. You have the Shlamim, the peace offering brought by the Nazir at the conclusion of his Nazir period. And you have the peace offering brought as a thanksgiving offering. In Judaism, we don't eat turkey by Thanksgiving. We bring a sacrifice, a peace offering, a carbon shlamim. Specifically, the verse tells us if a person has a reason to thank God, if they survived a perilous journey through the sea or through the desert, if they were extricated, released from a dangerous prison sentence, if they were deathly ill, God forbid, and were healed, they must thank God and they must bring a thanksgiving peace offering. And with this, we're told, they bring bread, lots and lots of bread, 4 different types of bread. 3 of them are different types of matzah bread, and 1 of them is a type of chametz bread. And they bring 10 loaves apiece of these 4 types. So do the math. With a person's peace thanksgiving offering, they bring 40 loaves of bread. And they got to eat it all within the specific time period. You do the math. It's not possible to do it all by yourself. Commentaries tell us the reason why someone who has a Thanksgiving offering brings 40 loaves of bread that you have to finish, you can't have any leftovers, it's because the only way to do that is you make a big party. And you invite everyone. If you invite 40 people, each one has a loaf of bread. Bread, either matzah bread or chametz bread. And the reason why is because you have a party to celebrate and to publicize the miracle that God did on your behalf. The Parsha proceeds to talk about the sacrifice leftovers. Every sacrifice that can be consumed, of course, there's the Ola offering, which is not consumed by anyone, and every sacrifice has its laws. But the peace offering that we just mentioned, or the sin offering that's consumed, or part of it is consumed by the priests, each one has a limited time frame in which it can be eaten. And it's forbidden to have any leftovers. And when there are leftovers past the deadline, they must be burned. We learn about the laws of pigul. That's the word. And there's no English translation. You go to Art Scroll, it just says pigul, P-I-G-G-U-L. This refers to incorrect intentions done during the procedure of the sacrifice. So to do a sacrifice, you have to slaughter. You have to take the blood and do the blood service. You got to walk to the altar. You got to sprinkle atop the altar. Any one of these processes done with the incorrect intent, with the intent for something which is against the protocol, like, for example, I am thinking about the fact that this is going to be eaten beyond the deadline, or outside of the location where it is permitted to be eaten. Such a sacrifice is invalid and may not be consumed. Read about the prohibition to eat sacrifices when you're impure, or to touch sacrificial food when you are impure, and the prohibition against eating forbidden fats and against eating blood. And the Parsha ends with the inauguration week of the Tabernacle. So just to orient ourselves chronologically, the Exodus happened on the 15th day of Nisan. And they leave, and the splitting of the sea, and the war against Amalek, and the eating manna, and they go to Mara, there's nothing to drink. 50 days later, they're at Sinai. Sinai revelation. 10 commandments. National prophecy. There's a fancy word. Theophany. The entire nation experiences prophecy together as one, and they survive. The next day, Moshe ascends the mountain. He tells them, you guys take care, I'll be back in 40 days. I'm going to get the details of the Torah. When he comes back, of course, the nation has made a terrible mistake. They made a golden calf. Moshe shatters the tablets. And the next day, he goes up the mountain for a second 40-day stint. This time, it's not to get tablets or to learn Torah. It's to secure forgiveness. After the second stint, he comes down, and God says, I want you to come up a third time. Make me stone tablets, replicas of the ones that you shattered. And I will etch upon them what I wrote on the first tablets that you shattered. Moshe ascends the mountain, goes up to the next realm for a third 40-day stint, and Moshe descends from the mountain on Yom Kippur, the first Yom Kippur of our nation's history. That's when the nation achieved full forgiveness. We once again are bearing tablets from God. The following day, the day after Yom Kippur, so it's almost a half a year after the Exodus, the Tabernacle project begins. Fundraising, get all the materials, appointing Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, tribe of Judah, to lead the project. Him and his lieutenants and his helpers. And they begin to build the tabernacle. According to our sources, the construction of the tabernacle, it took a little more than 2 months. On the 25th day of Kislev, which, not coincidentally, is the first day of Hanukkah, that's when they finished assembling all the different parts of the tabernacle. But the tabernacle was not immediately erected. It was held on ice for almost 2 months. For almost 3 months. Kislev to Teves, Teves to Shvat, Shvat to Adar. Nearly 3 months. On the 23rd day of the month of Adar, that's when we have the week of inauguration. And that's described at the end of the Parsha. Moshe is going to serve for 7 days as the interim high priest. And every single day of these 7 days, he's going to assemble the tabernacle by himself in the morning, do all the services of the tabernacle, plus additional inauguration sacrifices, and disassemble the tabernacle at night. And while Moshe is acting as the interim high priest, Aaron and his sons are on the tabernacle grounds, and they're not allowed to leave for 7 days. They're there watching and participating with some of the activities. That 7-day process is detailed at the end of our Parsha, and the next Parsha, which we will only read, of course, after Passover. We're going to have a week off, not a week off, but a week where we won't have the next installment of the Parsha because of Pesach. The next Parsha following Pesach, following Passover this year, is called Parshas Shemini, which means the 8th. It's the 8th day. That's the crossover day. It's the first day of Nisan. It's 2 weeks shy of a full year from the Exodus. And that's the day of the handoff, where Moshe is going to resume being an ordinary Levite, and Aaron and his sons will forever be the priests. And on that day, of course, tragedy strikes when Aaron's 2 eldest sons make an unauthorized offering and die, and the population of priests in the whole world goes from 5 to 3. So our Parsha ends off with a description of these days. Moshe is told to take Aaron and his sons and the garments and the anointing oil and the various sacrifices. And Moshe is told to anoint Aaron and his sons and anoint the tabernacle and everything inside of it. And do all the various different ceremonies, some done in tandem with Aaron and his sons, some alone. For 7 days, Moshe did all of these elaborate ceremonies with Aaron and his sons present. That's Parshas Tzav. Let's go a bit backstage. And we'll start at the very beginning. The protocols of the Olah. When the Torah begins, the description of the protocols of the Olah, of the elevation offering, it speaks about the first activity done in the temple, done in the tabernacle each morning. You got to clear away the ashes. We have to have a priest with a shovel walk up the altar and jostle and maneuver the coals, get a scoopful of ashes, walk down, go to the east, place it at the foot or near the altar. And once that activity is done, that ceremony is done, the day can begin. And we read about how all the priests would run up to the altar and arrange it, prepare it. And the full day's activities can commence. Which Cohen was in charge of doing this process, this Truma Hadeshin? So the Talmud tells us that there was a lottery. There was a lottery because all the Kohanim, they all wanted to do it. It was a highly coveted activity. And the Talmud tells us it used to be a race. They used to say free for all. Whoever gets there first. First come, first serve. And the Kohanim would all run up the altar, the ramp to get to the top. And the Talmud tells us 2 awful stories that happened that made them change their policy. The first story is so outrageous. Talmud tells that there were two Kohanim that were neck and neck. They're running up the altar, the ramp, to get to the top. First come, first serve. And one of the priests did something unconscionable. He pulled out a knife. Crazy. He stabbed the other priest so that he would get there first, which is obviously completely unconscionable and just horrifying. A homicide in the temple. Now, that's insane enough, but the story gets even more insane because the knife that this murderer used was actually a knife from the tabernacle or from the temple at the time. It was a holy, sacred knife. And the Talmud tells us, you'll have a hard time believing what I'm going to tell you just in a second or two. The Talmud tells us that the father of the victim, who's gurgling blood, who's about to die, he's alive, but he's not dead yet, but he's dying. The father runs up and he sees his son convulsing, and he tells the murderer, "May my son's death be an atonement for you." Okay, or he's saying maybe to the whole nation. But then he makes an observation, which it's hard for us to believe this. He's saying, well, the boy's not dead yet, and therefore the knife has not become impure. Because a dead body is the epitome of impurity. And therefore, if there's a knife stuck into a cadaver, God forbid, then the knife becomes impure. But the father says, whoa, he's not dead quite yet. The knife's still pure. And the Talmud says this is just an awful story because it shows that people were so careful about ritual matters, which is good. Of course, that's commendable. But the fact that that was even something that you could mention when there's someone there who is dying. Talmud says this is an example of a character flaw that was rife before the temple was destroyed, where the sanctity of life was diminished in the eyes of the people. There was so much murder that had happened, of course, relative to a baseline of 0. This is an example. And it happened because the two Kohanim were running neck to neck to be the first one to take the scoopful, the shovelful of ashes. Now, this was not sufficient grounds to change the policy. Talmud says this is not why they changed the policy. This story is too outrageous. It's an aberration. There's something wrong here. The family or the murderer, there's no justification. We don't expect this to be a pattern. Someone's mentally unwell. Maybe there were some safeguards that could have been installed, but there's not a reason to stop the policy of first come, first serve. But there was a second story. Again, neck and neck, a close race down to the finish line. And one of the contestants shoved the other one off the altar, off the ramp. And he broke his leg. And that was the reason why the sages decided this system is too dangerous. Such a tragedy or such an accident or such a crime, if you will, can happen again. Let's switch it to a lottery system. It's too dangerous. So they had a lottery. But you read the story and you see how the sages or the priests, it's 4 a.m. and they're running. They're running up the ramp up to the altar because they want to do this. There's something very desirable about the removal of the ashes from atop the altar. And it's not immediately clear to us what is so special about this. Okay, there's some ashes left over from yesterday's sacrifices. And someone's going to take a silver shovel and take off a little scoop of it and bring it down. Why is that so covetous? When I make the announcement, it's time to take out the garbage, we don't have a risk of fistfights. We may have fistfights for other reasons. But in our family, no one's fighting for the rights to do the chores of removal of the garbage. Now, of course, sacrifice is something very holy. But what's the secret? I want to suggest two ideas. And we'll frame it like this. There's a person in the Torah who is compared to ashes. There's only one such person that I can think of. He's one of the greatest of all time. And he said about himself, Va'anochi afar va'efer. I am but dust and ashes. And of course, we would think of that as being hyperbolic. We have to know there's no hyperbole in the Torah. Abraham, chapter 18, verse 27, he said, Anochi afar va'efer. I am dust and ashes. If he said that, there must be truth to it. If the Torah records it and canonizes it, it can't be just some exaggeration, some hyperbole. There's something about Abraham that's comparable to ashes. If we knew why, maybe we would know why the priests, they always made a sprint to have the privilege of engaging with the ashes. I want to suggest two approaches. We'll start with a Swedish chemist and engineer, Alfred Nobel. He made dynamite. It caused so much death. I don't want that to be my legacy. He made an endowment. All of his wealth will have a prize. And we'll once a year give the prize to the most fantastic accomplishments in all these different fields, in physics and chemistry and literature. The Peace Prize, medicine. And we look at this prize as like the pinnacle of accomplishment. Nobel Prize laureate. But I once read a study, or I read of a description of a study. What happens to the careers of Nobel Prize winners after they win the coveted, desirous prize? There's a phenomenon called the Nobel Prize effect, or the Nobel Prize dip. Someone reaches the absolute peak. There's no higher, more prestigious prize. And they won. Invariably, their output suffers. Their accomplishments suffer. Their innovation, their novel ideas, it drops. They start to coast. The speeding circuit, or very incremental improvements to their theory. But groundbreaking accomplishments, massive accomplishments, it's rare to find it once people already achieve greatness. There's something remarkable about Abraham. We read about Abraham in the Torah. He is already 75 years old. And the first thing we're told about him, or the first thing we're told about him specifically, is that he's told by Abraham to leave, lech lecha, depart. Leave the place that you're in now. Leave Haran. And go travel to land that I will show you. Abraham at the time was already the most highly decorated person in human history. At that time. But before he's even introduced in the Torah, before his story is told in the Torah, before that, he's already the most accomplished person in history. How do I know that? Because the sources tell us, first of all, the Torah tells us, that he brought with him the souls that he made in Haran. Now, you and I don't know how to make souls. Well, let me not speak for you. Most people don't know. I don't know. How do you make souls? Abraham was a soul maker. He knew how to make souls. Rashi tells us that means he brought people back to God. He converted the masses. How many people did he have in his movement? How many followers did Abraham have? So the Rambam gives us a number. Tens of thousands. Abraham had tens of thousands of followers. And he made their souls. He taught them about God. He taught them about faith, about mitzvahs, about righteousness. The whole world is swimming in idolatry. And one man is this bright beacon, this bright light, this incredible force who's bringing the masses back to God. It's a brand new phenomenon. The world's, since Adam at least, since Adam, it's been 2,000 years, and no one has accomplishments like Abraham. This is before he's even told to leave. What does God tell him? Leave. You're in the middle of turning over the whole world. You're in the middle of accomplishing fantastic, unprecedented things. You already have achieved immortality. But there are far greater things that you're destined to achieve. This is the first of Abraham's 10 tests. He's being challenged. You have enormous accomplishments. Are you going to be content with that? Are you going to be content with what you've accomplished hitherto? Or are you willing to accept God's plan for you, that there's far greater things, far greater accomplishments awaiting you in the future? Abraham, you're going to change the entire world. You're going to change all of history. You'll be the father of many nations. And of course, the progenitor of God's nation, who will receive Torah, who will rectify the entire world. Who will rectify the entire world. Abraham could have coasted. Abraham could have said, I've already accomplished more than any other person since Adam. Abraham left. This is the lesson of the ashes. The ashes that we find in the morning are not related to today's activities. Yesterday was an amazing day. Tremendous service of God. Tremendous dedication to God. And you worked really hard. At the end of the day, you brought a sacrifice to God. You achieved the highest level of closeness to our Creator. There's an enormous risk waiting for you in the morning. The greatest risk to today's greatness is reveling in yesterday's greatness. If you dwell on your previous accomplishments, that's the enemy of your future accomplishments. You coast. You rest on your laurels. You fall into a pattern of complacency. You plateau. Cruise control. The Torah tells us, before you begin anything today, you must clear away yesterday. Before you begin doing anything from today's agenda, you must dissociate yourself from yesterday's accomplishments. We have the altar. It symbolizes what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish. And I have some remnant of yesterday's accomplishments. I go to the altar and I remove it. I take a scoopful and I demonstrate. Before I even start, whatever happened yesterday, it's being removed. I'm casting it away. Because if I ruminate upon it too much, I'm going to imperil the likelihood of tremendous accomplishments today. But maybe the Almighty wants you to have just accomplishments of yesterday. No. If you have life today, if your heart is beating within your chest today, that means that the Almighty wants you alive today. And He has expectations, great expectations of you today. If your mission was done yesterday, you wouldn't have a mission today. But today, you must accomplish. Today, you must build. Today, you must push yourself to achieve further greatness. One of the great Rosh Hashivas, maybe really one of the great sages of the last 100 years, he was, in his day, he was the Gadol Ador. He's known as the greatest of the generation. His name was Rabbi Shach, Rav Shach. And he was head of the great yeshiva in Ponevezh, which is one of the premier yeshivos in Israel. And the way the yeshiva Talmud cycle is studied, this may be counterintuitive. There are 36 books of Talmud, but only 10 or 11 of them are studied on a consistent basis in the cycle of the yeshivos. Now, once someone graduates from the yeshivos, they're encouraged to study the entirety of the Talmud. But there are 10 or 11 or so different books of Talmud that are studied in all the yeshivos, or almost all the yeshivos, shall we say. So it's basically a 5 or 6 year cycle. You learn 1 or 2 books a year, and then you repeat them every 5 or 6 years. Some are longer, some are shorter, and so on. So if you're a Rosh Yeshiva, you're giving lectures in Talmud, you have your notes from 5 years ago, and from 10 years ago, and from 15 years ago, and from 20 years ago. My grandfather, blessed memory, used to tell us, he would say, the yeshiva has 2 leaders, 2 heads. The Rosh Yeshiva, who gives the Talmud lectures, and the Mashgiach, who's the spiritual dean, who gives the ethical lectures. It's much easier to be a Rosh Yeshiva. Do that. Do that. Why? Because you work for 5 years, and you really invest all of your efforts into all the books that you will ever cover in the yeshiva. And then you could just say, what else? Say, give a lecture I did 5 years ago. You give the same lecture. And it's great. But if you're the ethical dean, you're the spiritual dean, it doesn't work like that. Every single week, it's got to be a brand new lecture. But someone came to Rabbi Shach and said, I don't understand. 5 years ago, when you spoke about this exact subject in the Talmud, you said something completely different than what you're saying today. I don't understand. I have the notes. I listened to the tape, reel to reel. Why are you saying something different than what you said last time? So Rabbi Shach told him, what do you think I've been doing the last 5 years? I'm trying to study and grow in my Talmudic prowess every day. So I've spent 5 years studying. I think I achieved a higher level of Torah knowledge and Torah understanding and Torah insight, and now I see it differently. He could have coasted and been one of the great Talmudic lecturers in the world, but he pushed himself. Take a little bit of the ashes, a little bit of yesterday's accomplishments. Those ashes symbolize yesterday's accomplishments, and that's amazing. But if you focus on it too much, you're imperiling today's accomplishments. So the very first thing that you do today, says Rabbi Hirsch, before you start any new activities, you have to make a conscious and concerted effort to remove some of yesterday's accomplishments. Don't fall into this terrible and dreadful trap. Abraham says about himself, I am ashes. You could find a little hint to how Abraham became Abraham in the story of the ashes. He was already the greatest person the world had ever seen before his story even begins in the Torah. He pushed himself. He never stopped pushing himself. And that's how he changed the world. I want to suggest another idea. We're talking about sacrifices. It's the second week in a row. And last week we spoke about the mechanism of sacrifices. Torah is like a drawdown of blessing from heaven, but you have to have a corresponding push up of something below, something lowly to God. A very profound idea that our ability to draw down, to receive blessing from heaven is directly commensurate to the amount that we are pushing up to heaven in the form of sacrifices and sacrifice equivalent, namely prayer. I want to suggest a different idea. Man is a hybrid, half animal, half angel, half body, half soul. The truth is, it's more stark than that. Our soul is holier than the angels. Our body is less holy than the animals. Sacrifices are a big part of our religion because they symbolize what we're trying to do. You sacrifice an animal. The animal's a different species, right? But there's something about the animal that's very similar to us. We are also half animal. Just as the animal has animalistic tendencies, we too have an animalistic side. We too have an inclination to be very instinctive and impulsive. The animal's resistant to change, resistant to elevation, stubborn, focusing only on the physical agenda. And once, I think I read it, that you never see, animals looking up to heaven. Never. Doesn't exist. Your puppy that you love, your cat that provides you comfort and companionship, never looks up to that, never gazes at the cosmos. Why? Because the animals, it's very physical. Its entire universe is the physical perspective. And we have a tendency to that as well. Not entirely. We're a hybrid. This is the tension of our lives. This is the challenge of our lives. And a sacrifice where we take the animal and we elevate it to God. We sacrifice it to God. That's symbolizing us, or our attempt, our yearning, our hope that we can consecrate ourselves, all of ourselves, body and soul, to God Almighty. It's a form of dedication. It's a form of purification. We want to take our physicality and refine it. It too should be elevated towards God. We should clear away our animalistic tendencies. We're trying to find holiness. We're trying to find purity. We're trying to find something special, a spark within us. That's what life's about. You can say that a sacrifice is almost a picture and a symbol of what we're trying to accomplish in life. We're trying to take our physicality and make that be dedicated and elevated and channeled towards God. And what we have left are the most refined of refined things. There's something about the sacrifice that's not combustible. It's not consumable. You put it on the hottest fire all night, and it still doesn't get transformed. It's something which is beyond the ability of fire to destroy or to elevate. That's the ashes. There's something non-animalistic that's embedded inside this massive animal. This most animalistic animal has something which is not animalistic, which can't be consumed. That's holiness. That's a spark of holiness. I want to suggest an idea. It's a bit of a spiritual idea. Abraham said, I'm but ashes. Maybe this is describing the mechanism by which Abraham became who he became. You read Abraham's story in the Torah, and he's so selfless. He's 99 years old, recently circumcised. It's so hot outside. God appears to him and he tells God, I have 3 pigeons. I got to run. And he's running and running and running. Let's make them fresh and the best. And 3 different cows and tons of cow in mustard. Where's the animalistic tendency of being selfish? Of being self-centered? I need some me time. Doesn't exist with Abraham. He is but ashes. The animalistic part of him is gone. The Torah tells us, of course, that Talmud tells us that this is also humility. Abraham said, I am but dust and ashes. Moshe and Aaron said, we are nothing. David said, Anochi tola'as v'lo ish. I am a worm, not a man. But maybe on a deeper level, the ashes symbolize what remains after all physicality, all animalistic physicality is removed. Abraham, he overcame all of his animalistic tendencies. The scripture calls Abraham the great giant Adam. He was a replica of Adam. Adam before his sin. Adam before there was evil attached to him. Abraham was ashes. And everyone wants those ashes because they symbolize the goal of life. Total dedication for God, and all of our animalistic tendencies elevated to God, and all that's left is the non-animalistic side. What remains after all physicality is removed. There's something that just can't be destroyed, can't be burned. It's not physical. It's spiritual. We have a mitzvah with ashes. It's a red heifer. It's the only way to hit someone which is impure and make him pure. Only way to do it. Someone comes into contact with the dead. They are impure with the highest level of impurity. There's only one way to transform them into being pure. A red heifer. Specifically, you slaughter, you burn the red heifer, and you produce a mound of ashes. Those ashes are the only way to transform someone who is impure because of contact with the dead into being pure. And the commentaries tell us the red heifer, it's red. That's the color of Esav. And it's a cow. It somehow resembles the golden calf. And it doesn't have a yoke on it. It's refusing to submit itself to God. But there's a process by which we can transform that, even that, into ashes. We can isolate the spark of holiness and purity, from something which is so animalistic, more animalistic than most. And those ashes, they're actually the highest level of holiness and purity. All this is part of the mitzvah of clearing away the ashes. We don't clear them away, really. We go and we want them. We're desirous of it. You take a scoopful of it, bring it down the ramp, and you place it on the floor of the temple and of the tabernacle. And it gets absorbed into the ground. This is something we don't want to get rid of. We want to absorb it. Abraham is ashes. Abraham managed to shed from himself all vestiges of physicality. All that was left were ashes. When the Kohen, did this ceremony, he's doing something which is invoking something very lofty. And it's no surprise that all the Kohanim, they were all very desirous of the mitzvah, of the great privilege to demonstrate this idea. This is what life's about. Sacrifices are a major part of our spiritual lives. And here we see the protocol, as it's known, the protocol of the Olah. It's captured in the ashes. The ashes are Abrahamic. And that's something we want to take with us. That's the goal. Now here's the scary part. I like to do the scary part at the end of the podcast, because most of the people would be frightened away. They're not listening anymore. They stop after 35 minutes, 45 minutes, talking about ashes. It's count me out. A little bit scary. You ready? The Talmud tells us, Poshe Yisrael begufan, the sinners of Israel in their body. Listen carefully. Every word of the Talmud is gold. The sinners of Israel in their body. It's possible for an Israelite to be a sinner and still have an association with their body. They go to a place called Gehenom, purgatory, and they're burned for 12 months. And afterwards, their body's gone. And a wind comes and scatters their ashes underneath the feet of the righteous. This sounds so unpleasant, and I'm about to surprise you. In the last page of my grandfather's final book that he wrote in his lifetime, since he passed, there's been many books published posthumously, but in his lifetime, when he was almost 90 years old, he published a book called Ha-Mitzvos Ha-Shrulos, the mitzvos that are equal, about the 7 mitzvos that are representative of all of Torah. And on the last page, he cites this Talmud. And he says that Rabbi Eliyahu Lopian, who's one of the great sages of the last 100 years, who had a visitation from Elijah the prophet, or likely had a visitation from Elijah the prophet, when he read this Talmud, he said the following frightening and counterintuitive thing. He said, this description of spending 12 months in Gehenna, and the body's gone, and all that's left is some ashes, and a wind comes and blows them underneath the feet of the righteous. This is a very lofty level, and I hope that I'm worthy of this level. Now, all of us are thinking, we'd rather avoid it. We don't want the Gehenna. That's why it's very surprising. But regardless, we have a description here of Gehenna. Gehenna is something which is done for our benefit. And the Talmud describes it as transforming a person into ashes. Abraham, in his lifetime, said about himself, and the Torah records it and canonizes it. It's true. It's not hyperbolic. I am ashes. He started off as we all do. He's like a sacrifice. He said there's physicality, there's animalistic tendencies that can be offered to God, that can be elevated. There is a way to turn an animal into ashes. That's a sacrifice. That's the goal. Abraham did it. He did it in his lifetime. Sinners of Israel with their body is still playing a big part in their lives. They too will become ashes. They too will have this incredible benefit of having their physicality removed and that kernel of holiness that's always within them to be unearthed, to be distilled out of that mass. We all look at ourselves, and if we're honest, we find a lot of animalistic tendencies within ourselves, a lot of flaws, a lot of impulses that don't seem to be very angelic. We're stricken with all sorts of character flaws, character maladies, and defects. Do we feel like we're worthy to stand before God? It's a frightening question. The Torah spends a lot of time talking about sacrifices. It's a major part of the Torah. And it's a major part of our spiritual lives. And our parsha begins with the protocols of the Olah, the Torah of the Olah. What's the objective? It's the ashes. We are trying to sacrifice ourselves for God. Not self-harm, of course. Refinement, elevation. Overcoming our impulses. We are animalistic, yes. Must we remain animalistic? Abraham He's the paradigm. He's the exemplar. He's the portrait of greatness. He is ashes. And we will become ashes as well. We too will be refined as well, one way or the other. I appreciate you listening to this edition of the Parsha podcast. Everyone should have a wonderful Chag Parsha v'Sameach, a kosher and happy and joyous Pesach. The fundraiser is still ongoing. GiveTorch.org. You'll find the link in the description. Have an amazing rest of your day. An amazing rest of your week. Of course, a magnificent and terrific and powerful and meaningful Shabbos upcoming this week is called Shabbos HaGadol, the Great Shabbos. It's a very special Shabbos, the week before Pesach. Have an amazing Passover. A kosher Passover. It should be a Passover of joy, of redemption for all of us. Whatever we're going through, whatever challenges we're in, whatever Egypt we're trapped up in, we should receive extrication and redemption. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing week. Have an amazing festival. Language says rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.